What would you do if a flight attendant embarrassed you in front of an entire cabin? That's exactly what happened to a young couple during their journey. But just 5 minutes later, something happened that left everyone on board stunned. The airline took a step no one anticipated. The flight attendant? Fired. But what led to this dramatic turn of events? Stick around to uncover the twists that followed. Before we dive into the story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates, don't forget to subscribe for more captivating tales. The flight had just taken off from Clearwater, bound for New Haven. Everything seemed ordinary. A smooth ascent, light chatter, and the hum of engines filling the air. The passengers were settling in for what they thought would be a quiet, uneventful flight. Among them were a young couple, Ethan and Maya, seated near the middle of the plane. Ethan and Maya had been eagerly anticipating this trip for weeks, looking forward to some much-needed downtime. But what began as a minor inconvenience would soon spiral into a confrontation no one could have predicted. It all started when Maya politely approached a flight attendant, a woman named Linda, to ask for a bit more space in the overhead bin. The couple had brought a couple of carry-ons, and Maya hoped for some extra room to secure their bags. Linda, however, seemed irritated from the moment she stepped into the aisle. Her body language was stiff, her tone curt. Without even making eye contact, she gestured sharply to the opposite side of the plane, indicating there was space in another compartment. Maya hesitated, surprised by the cold response, but she didn't want to cause a scene. She thanked Linda and moved her bag to the suggested spot. But something about the interaction felt off. Linda's tone wasn't just indifferent, it bordered on hostility. Returning to her seat, Maya exchanged a look with Ethan, who shrugged it off. "Maybe she's having a bad day," he whispered. But the incident was far from over. Minutes later, as Linda walked back down the aisle, Maya tried to catch her eye with a polite smile, hoping to smooth over any awkwardness. Instead of responding in kind, Linda stopped, glanced down at her, and said loudly, "You should have thought about that before boarding the plane." The words landed like a slap, their volume drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Maya's smile faltered as the mocking tone hung in the air. Ethan, who had been reading, looked up sharply. Maya, not one to let something like this slide, stood and addressed Linda. "Excuse me, did you just say that to us?" Linda didn't miss a beat. With a flick of her wrist, she replied dismissively, "What's the problem? Afraid of a little honesty?" The sarcasm stung, and Maya felt her cheeks flush. Around her, passengers exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering while others avoided eye contact altogether. Ethan stood beside Maya, his voice calm but firm. "That was completely uncalled for," he said, his tone brokering no argument. "There's no need to speak to us or anyone like that." Linda, however, seemed unfazed. Rolling her eyes, she waved him off and turned back toward the first-class cabin, where she began tending to other passengers. Maya sank back into her seat, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in her lap. "Did that really just happen?" she whispered to Ethan, who shook his head, equally stunned. Before either of them could process the encounter, they noticed a man in uniform approaching their row. He introduced himself as Paul, one of the flight supervisors. Paul had been standing at the back of the plane, quietly observing the interaction. "I couldn't help but notice there might have been an issue," Paul said, his voice calm but authoritative. "Can you explain what happened?" Maya, still shaken, recounted the series of events, her voice steady as she described every word Linda had said. Ethan chimed in, his tone measured but clearly upset. Paul nodded, taking it all in. "Thank you for letting me know," he said. "I'll handle this." With that, Paul turned and headed toward the galley, where Linda had disappeared moments earlier. Ethan and Maya watched as he vanished behind the curtain, tension thick in the air. The cabin was silent, save for the quiet hum of the engines. Passengers whispered among themselves, unsure of what was happening but clearly sensing that something significant was unfolding. Maya turned to Ethan, her voice barely audible. "Do you think they'll do anything?" Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I don't think this is over." Neither of them could have guessed what was about to happen. Within minutes, Linda's actions would have far-reaching consequences, and this flight would become a story no one on board would ever forget. As Ethan and Maya waited anxiously in their seats, the tension in the cabin continued to grow. The passengers who had witnessed Linda's rudeness seemed unsure of how to react, caught between their discomfort and curiosity. But one thing was clear. Something was about to change. Ethan leaned forward in his seat, staring toward the galley where the supervisor, Paul, had disappeared moments earlier. Maya, trying to calm herself, fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater, her thoughts a whirlwind. They were still reeling from Linda's harsh words, and a gnawing question persisted in both their minds. Would anything actually come of this? Just as the couple began to lose hope, the intercom buzzed sharply, cutting through the tense silence of the cabin. The captain's calm, authoritative voice filled the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to unforeseen circumstances, we will be making a change to the cabin crew for the remainder of the flight. We appreciate your patience as we adjust." Maya's eyes widened in surprise. "What's happening?" she whispered, glancing at Ethan. Before he could answer, the intercom crackled again, this time with the steady voice of the flight supervisor, Paul. "We would like to inform you that the flight attendant previously serving this cabin will be relieved of her duties for the rest of this flight. Thank you for your understanding." A stunned silence fell over the cabin. Ethan and Maya exchanged disbelieving looks, their expressions mirroring the shock rippling through the other passengers. The announcement was deliberately vague, but there was no mistaking its implications. Linda was being removed from her position. Around them, passengers murmured quietly, trying to piece together what had just unfolded. Though many didn't know the full story, the shift in the air was palpable. An unspoken resolution seemed to settle in, a collective acknowledgement that something significant had happened. Maya felt a mix of emotions swirl inside her. Relief, yes, but also vindication. Linda had humiliated her, belittled her in front of everyone, and now it seemed the airline was taking it seriously. Ethan, still absorbing the gravity of the situation, turned to her and said, "I didn't think they'd actually do anything." "But they did." Maya nodded, a faint, almost bitter smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I didn't think they'd act so quickly." They leaned back in their seats, still grappling with what had just unfolded. The events had been so sudden, so jarring, that neither could fully process them. Would Linda face permanent consequences? Would the airline apologize? Or would it all fade into memory by the time they landed in Harbor City? Before they could dwell on it further, the door to the galley opened again. This time, it wasn't just Paul who emerged. 2 uniformed security officers flanked him, leading Linda by the arm. Her face was flushed with anger, her eyes darting around the cabin as if searching for someone to blame. She didn't meet Maya's or Ethan's gaze, but everyone aboard understood why she was being escorted away. As Linda passed by their row, Maya caught her eye for a brief moment. The flight attendant's expression was cold, her lips pressed into a thin line. There was no apology, no hint of remorse, only a defiant disdain. Watching Linda being led down the aisle, Maya felt a complicated sense of satisfaction. Justice? Maybe. But it didn't erase the sting of Linda's words or undo the humiliation she had endured. Still, the airline's swift action made it clear they wouldn't let this go unnoticed. When Linda disappeared into the rear of the plane, Paul returned to the cabin, resuming his position with calm composure. The cabin settled into an uneasy quiet, but something had undeniably shifted. Ethan turned to Maya, his voice softer now. "I guess that's it?" Maya shook her head slowly. "I don't know if she's fired for good," she said, still trying to process it all, "but they definitely made an example of her." In a matter of minutes, the power dynamics had shifted completely. What had begun as a polite request for extra space in an overhead bin had turned into an incident no one on board would soon forget. As the plane cruised smoothly above the clouds, the cabin remained subdued, but oddly expectant. Passengers who had been whispering now fell quiet, some reflecting on Linda's behavior, others trying to return to their own routines. For Ethan and Maya, the past hour replayed in their minds like a reel on loop. Though they sat in silence, the weight of what had happened lingered. Ethan leaned back, his gaze fixed on the seatback in front of him. Maya, unable to shake the unease, tapped her fingers lightly on her armrest. It was hard to focus on anything else. The confrontation, the humiliation, and now, the fallout. Though they didn't say it aloud, both knew one thing for certain. This flight was far from ordinary, and they had no idea how the story would truly end. The announcement had been made, and Linda had been escorted off the plane. On the surface, it seemed like the situation was resolved, but Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. "Do you think she'll come back?" Maya asked softly, breaking the silence. Her voice was more reflective now, the earlier tension giving way to contemplation. Ethan shook his head. "I doubt it. They wouldn't make a public announcement like that if they were planning to let her return," he said, pausing thoughtfully. "But honestly, I'm surprised they acted so quickly. I thought they'd try to have a talk with her first, or maybe just let it slide." Maya nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too. I wasn't expecting it to happen like this. I thought we'd have to deal with her for the entire flight." "We don't, though," Ethan replied, his voice firm, "and that's what matters." Maya managed a faint smile, though her mind was still racing with thoughts of what had happened. She couldn't stop replaying Linda's words in her head. The sharpness of her tone, the dismissive attitude, the way she had mocked them so brazenly. The realization of how much it had affected her came slowly, and she found herself whispering, "You know, I've never had anyone treat me like that before." She turned to Ethan, her eyes searching his for understanding. "And I don't know why it hit me so hard, it was just so unnecessary." Ethan reached over and took her hand gently. "It's not about you, Maya. It's about her," he said. "Some people think they can get away with treating others like that. It doesn't have anything to do with who you are. It's all about them." Maya nodded, but the sting of Linda's words still lingered. "I just didn't expect it from someone who's supposed to help," she murmured. "I mean, it's literally her job to make passengers comfortable. How does someone go from helping to that?" Ethan gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "It doesn't make sense," he admitted, "but what matters is that you didn't let her get away with it. You stood up for yourself." Maya smiled faintly, though the tension in her chest hadn't fully eased. "I guess I did," she said. "But honestly, I didn't have to do much. The airline handled it. All I had to do was tell the supervisor what happened." Ethan chuckled softly. "You're not the only one who noticed. I think most of the passengers were watching it unfold too." Everyone knew she was in the wrong. Looking around the cabin, Maya realized Ethan was right. Many passengers had been watching. Even though no one had intervened, it seemed like they all recognized the injustice of what had happened. Some passengers were still casting glances her way, their discomfort evident, while others leaned forward in hushed conversations, waiting for the situation to reach its conclusion. In an unspoken way, the entire cabin had become part of the moment. Maya and Ethan may have been the targets of Linda's behavior, but the ripple effect of her actions had touched everyone on board. As the minutes passed, the couple noticed a marked difference in the demeanor of the flight attendants who had replaced Linda. They were polite and professional, moving through the aisles with genuine smiles and warm interactions. The oppressive tension that had filled the cabin earlier began to dissipate, replaced by an atmosphere of calm. It was clear that the mood on the plane had shifted. Maya felt a small wave of relief wash over her. What had started as a tense and distressing flight was finally beginning to feel normal again. She leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes briefly as the steady hum of the engines soothed her nerves. It wasn't the journey she had imagined, but it was almost over. The only lingering question now was what would happen when they landed. Would Linda be waiting at the airport, ready to defend herself? Or had the airline already taken final steps to address the situation? They would find out soon enough. The plane glided smoothly toward Harbor City, and the final stretch of the flight passed without incident. Yet, the unease still lingered in the air. Maya and Ethan sat in a quiet lull, their minds slowly unraveling the events that had just unfolded. Outside the window, the sun was setting, casting a warm orange glow over the horizon. The serene view felt like a stark contrast to the turbulence of their emotions. As the captain's voice announced their arrival, neither Maya nor Ethan really registered his words. Their thoughts were too preoccupied with what might happen next. When the plane touched down, there was a collective sigh of relief among the passengers. Slowly, they stood to gather their belongings, their earlier curiosity and whispers giving way to the routine movements of deplaning. For the others, it seemed as though the strange event was already fading into memory. But for Maya and Ethan, it was far from over. For Maya and Ethan, the flight may have landed, but the story was far from over. They exchanged uncertain glances as the plane taxied to the gate. Maya couldn't ignore the two things she noticed almost immediately. A pair of airport security officers stationed at the jet bridge door, and a small group of airline representatives waiting nearby. A knot tightened in her stomach. What was this all about? As soon as the plane came to a complete stop, passengers began to deboard, some in a hurry and others chatting quietly. Maya and Ethan grabbed their bags and joined the line moving toward the exit. As they approached the jet bridge, Maya noticed one of the security officers watching them closely. She suddenly felt like she was under scrutiny, even though she and Ethan hadn't done anything wrong. When they finally reached the gate, one of the airline representatives stepped forward. The woman, dressed in a sharp navy blazer and with a professional demeanor, greeted them with a serious expression. "Are you the couple who reported the flight attendant's behavior?" she asked. Maya nodded, her voice steady despite her apprehension. "Yes, we are." The woman offered a small smile, but it wasn't warm or comforting. It felt more like a polite formality. "Please follow me," she said. "We need to speak with you for a moment." Maya and Ethan exchanged another glance. This wasn't what they had expected. They had assumed the ordeal would be over once they landed, but now it seemed they were being pulled into a formal discussion. The representative led them through the busy terminal, weaving past travelers with purpose, until they reached a small office tucked away at the back of the gate area. Inside, a handful of airline staff were already gathered, along with a man Maya assumed to be the manager. The woman gestured for them to sit, her voice softening as she said, "Thank you for your patience. We take matters like this very seriously and want to ensure that the issue is fully addressed." Maya and Ethan sat down, their curiosity tinged with a hint of unease. The manager, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a calm yet authoritative presence, introduced himself. He sat opposite them and began speaking, his tone serious but apologetic. "First and foremost, I want to sincerely apologize for the behavior of our flight attendant," he said. "What happened was completely unacceptable and does not reflect the values or standards we uphold as an airline. Please know that we are taking immediate action." Maya was caught off guard by the formality of his words. She had expected a generic apology, maybe even a scripted statement, but this felt more direct, almost weighty. Ethan, leaning forward slightly, asked, "What do you mean by immediate action?" The manager nodded as though he'd been anticipating the question. "We've already begun an internal review of the incident. We are taking appropriate disciplinary measures, and I can confirm that the flight attendant in question will no longer be part of our crew moving forward." He paused, letting the statement sink in. "We deeply regret the discomfort this caused you and the unfair treatment you experienced." Maya and Ethan sat in stunned silence. The gravity of the situation was more than they had expected. Linda, the flight attendant who had been so dismissive and rude, was going to lose her position. It was both satisfying and unsettling. They had spoken up, and it seemed the airline wasn't just acknowledging the problem. They were taking significant steps to address it. But the questions lingered. Was this the right move? Would Linda's termination really change anything? Were there going to be ripple effects they couldn't yet foresee? The manager continued, breaking their thoughts. "We will also be issuing you a formal apology in writing and offering compensation for the inconvenience. It's important to us that we make this right." Maya glanced at Ethan, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. She turned back to the manager and said, "Thank you. We just wanted to make sure something was done. This shouldn't have happened in the first place." The manager's expression softened slightly. "We completely understand, and again, we're very sorry. We are committed to ensuring that this does not happen again." After a brief discussion about the compensation process, the manager stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "If there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to contact us. We value all our passengers and strive to provide the best possible experience." Maya and Ethan stood as well, a sense of closure beginning to take shape. As they walked out of the office and into the terminal, Maya turned to Ethan, her voice quiet but thoughtful. "I still can't believe it," she said. "I didn't think they'd actually take it this far." Ethan smiled faintly. "Neither did I. But it's done now." As they stepped out into the bustling terminal, the weight of the situation began to lift. While the memory of the incident still lingered, they both felt a growing sense of relief that they had spoken up, and that it had mattered. What had begun as a deeply uncomfortable moment ended with the airline taking decisive action. Yet, as Maya and Ethan stepped into the bright lights of Harbor City, Maya couldn't shake a lingering question. What happens now? Would this incident continue to weigh on her mind? Would Linda, the flight attendant, find another job in the industry? She had no answers, but one thing was certain: the flight had left an indelible mark on their lives. In the days that followed, Maya and Ethan tried to move forward. On the surface, everything seemed normal. They dove into their plans, exploring the sights and sounds of the city, but underneath it all, a faint unease persisted. It wasn't something they could articulate, it just lingered, a subtle shadow over their otherwise bright trip. Maya did her best to focus on the present, marveling at the towering skyscrapers, the bustling energy of Nova Square, and the vibrant lights that pulsed through the city streets. Ethan, ever the optimist, encouraged her to enjoy the moments. For the most part, she did. They dined at excellent restaurants, attended a theatrical performance, and even took a ferry ride to admire the city's iconic coastline. But despite the beauty and excitement around them, Maya couldn't fully escape the memories of the flight. The humiliation, the tension, and the confrontation replayed in her mind like an unwelcome reel. It wasn't until several days later, while they were unwinding in their hotel room after a long day of sightseeing, that reality came knocking. Maya's phone buzzed on the bedside table. She picked it up to find an email with the subject line, "Follow up on your recent flight incident." She stared at the message for a moment, hesitant to open it. Part of her wasn't sure she wanted to revisit the experience, but curiosity won out, and she tapped the screen. The email was lengthy, but as Maya skimmed through the details, her eyes widened. The airline had gone far beyond a simple apology. In addition to expressing their regret, they included a travel voucher worth several $100s, a compensation gesture far greater than Maya had expected. But the most surprising part? The email confirmed that Linda had been permanently removed from the flight crew roster. It even stated that she had undergone retraining to better handle customer service situations in the future. Maya set her phone down, processing the words. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen, then turned to Ethan, who was scrolling through his own phone. "You won't believe this," she said, holding her phone out to him. Ethan read the email quickly, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the details. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "I didn't think they'd go this far." "Neither did I," Maya replied. "But I guess they're serious about making things right." She exhaled slowly, realizing she'd been holding her breath. For days, she had questioned whether the airline had done enough, whether Linda had faced appropriate consequences for her behavior. Now, the email seemed to answer those doubts. Maya felt an unexpected sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just the compensation, it was the principle of the matter. The airline's response showed that they were willing to stand against the kind of unprofessionalism Linda had displayed. But as relief settled over her, another thought surfaced. Was this truly the end? Would the story fade from memory? Or would there be more to uncover? Maya couldn't help but wonder if Linda's dismissal was the result of just this one incident, or if there had been other complaints about her that the airline hadn't disclosed. "I guess we'll never know the full story," Maya said quietly, looking at Ethan. He noticed the contemplative expression on her face and smiled gently. "You okay?" he asked. Maya nodded. "Yeah, it's just strange. I thought we'd get an apology and maybe a small gesture, then move on. But this feels like something bigger, like we actually changed something." "You did," Ethan said firmly. "You stood up for yourself, and it mattered." Maya smiled, a small wave of pride washing over her. The past few days had been emotionally taxing, but they had handled it. They had spoken up, and now it felt like the weight of the situation was finally beginning to lift. As the evening wore on, Maya and Ethan stayed up talking about the rest of their plans for the trip. The email felt like the closure they hadn't realized they needed, but Maya couldn't quite shake the sense that the story wasn't fully over. Would Linda try to challenge her dismissal? Would this incident become something larger? Only time would tell. For now, they were just two travelers trying to enjoy the rest of their vacation. As they drifted off to sleep that night, the city lights outside their window twinkled softly, a reminder that life keeps moving forward, even after the most unsettling of experiences. The days in Harbor City passed quickly, and Maya and Ethan found themselves settling into a pleasant rhythm. They spent their time strolling through Greenway Park, visiting art galleries, and savoring long afternoons at cozy local cafes. The incident with the flight attendant, while still fresh in their memories, began to recede into the background, becoming just another strange chapter in an otherwise enjoyable trip. Yet, every so often, the memory would resurface, uninvited. It wasn't something they could entirely forget. The encounter had left an undeniable mark, even though the airline's swift action had helped ease the sting. Life, as it does, moved on. The evening before their scheduled flight home to Crestview, Maya was sitting at a quaint outdoor cafe, sipping her coffee and enjoying the view of bustling streets bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Her phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, expecting a routine message or a call from a friend. When she saw the caller ID, her heart skipped a beat. It was the airline. "Hello?" she answered, her tone calm but tinged with surprise. "Good evening, Miss Carter," the voice on the other end said. "This is James from Skyline Air. I'm following up regarding your recent experience with one of our flight attendants. I wanted to check if you were satisfied with the resolution we provided and see if you had any additional concerns or feedback." Maya glanced at Ethan, who raised an eyebrow in curiosity. She motioned for him to stay quiet, then took a steadying breath before responding. "Yes, I received your email," she said. "Everything seems fine now. The compensation was appreciated, and I understand that Linda has been removed from duty." "I'm glad to hear that," James replied. "I also wanted to let you know that, in response to this incident, we've initiated a broader review of our flight crew training and customer service standards. It's part of our commitment to ensuring that such incidents don't happen again." Maya blinked, surprised. "A broader review?" she asked. "I didn't realize that was part of the process." "We take customer feedback very seriously," James explained. "As part of this initiative, we've implemented additional training for all our crew members, not just in handling challenging situations, but also in treating all passengers with the respect and professionalism they deserve. We want to make sure no one feels the way you did during your flight." Maya's thoughts raced. This was more than she had expected. The airline had already taken action against Linda, but now it seemed they were using the incident as an opportunity for systemic change. Part of her felt reassured. It was good to know they were addressing the issue on a larger scale. But another part of her remained skeptical. Would these measures truly make a difference, or were they just a way to save face? "That's good to hear," Maya said finally, trying to keep her tone neutral. "I appreciate you keeping me updated." "Of course," James replied. "We want you and all our passengers to feel valued and comfortable while flying with us. If you have any further concerns or if there's anything else we can do, please don't hesitate to reach out." Maya glanced at Ethan, who had been listening attentively. "Thank you for letting me know," she said. "I'll keep that in mind." James ended the call with a polite farewell, leaving Maya staring at her phone. A broader review? Additional training? It all sounded promising, but she wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or wary. The airline's actions seemed genuine, but it was hard to predict if they would lead to lasting change. "Well, that's new," Maya said, her voice still carrying traces of disbelief. "What's new?" Ethan asked. "They're launching a full review of their training and customer service practices," Maya explained. Ethan raised his eyebrows. "That's a big move." "Yeah," Maya agreed, her smile faint but hopeful. "They said it's part of their effort to make sure nothing like this happens again. I don't know if it's just lip service or if they're really going to do something about it." Ethan thought for a moment before responding. "Even if it's not just because of us, at least they're taking it seriously. I wouldn't have expected them to go this far. Maya nodded slowly. True. But part of me wonders, are they doing this because of our case, or have there been other complaints like this that we don't know about? Maybe both, Ethan said with a shrug. Either way, it's a step in the right direction. Maya didn't respond right away. Instead, she thought about the call and the promises the airline had made. It was easy to get caught up in the details, to question whether these changes would really lead to something meaningful. But for now, she had to admit, it was a significant step forward. Others diminish your dignity. As Maya and Ethan finished their coffee and began preparing for their flight back to Crestview, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this story wasn't entirely over. There was something about the whole situation, something deeper, that felt unresolved. Would the airline truly follow through on its promises? Would Linda's dismissal mark the end of the matter, or was there more beneath the surface? Maya didn't know, but one thing was clear. This experience had changed something in her, and she wasn't going to forget it anytime soon. The flight home was uneventful, a stark contrast to the tension and drama of their previous journey. Maya and Ethan boarded with a mix of relief and anticipation. The closure they had received from the airline was reassuring, but there was still a lingering unease Maya couldn't quite put into words. As they settled into their seats, Maya's eyes instinctively scanned the cabin. She half expected to see some trace of the ordeal, maybe Linda in a different uniform or someone mentioning the incident in passing. But of course, there was nothing. The flight attendants moved about with quiet professionalism, tending to passengers as though nothing unusual had ever happened. Maya tried to focus on the present, the comfort of the seat, the hum of the engines, and the soft murmur of passengers around them. Still, her thoughts kept drifting back to the phone call from Skyline Air and the promises they had made about overhauling their customer service training. What kind of real change would come from those promises? Would the airline actually keep its word, or had it all been a public relations move to smooth things over? Ethan noticed the faraway look in her eyes and leaned over. "You okay?" he asked softly. Maya sighed, rubbing her temple. "Yeah, I'm fine. Can't stop thinking about it. The airline is doing all these things to make sure it doesn't happen again, but I can't help wondering if it's enough. It all feels like a lot of talk." Ethan nodded, understanding her uncertainty. "I get it," he said. "You're just trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. It's not easy to let go of something like this when you don't know if it'll actually lead to anything meaningful." "I guess so," Maya murmured, turning her gaze to the endless stretch of clouds outside the window. "I want to believe it'll make a difference, but part of me wonders if Linda was just one bad apple. What if the rest of the crew is just as bad, and she's the only one who got caught?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't think that's the case. If it were, the airline wouldn't be making these changes. They wouldn't overhaul their training just for one person's mistake. It sounds like they've recognized a bigger issue." Maya thought about his words. He had a point. The airline wasn't just addressing Linda's actions. They were acknowledging something larger, something systemic. If they were taking the time to reassess their training and redefine their approach to customer service, maybe there was hope for meaningful change after all. Even so, it still felt strange, like a story that hadn't fully concluded. As the plane began its descent into Crestview, Maya felt a growing sense of finality. This chapter of their journey was coming to an end. The flight had passed without incident, and the follow-up from the airline had provided them with some resolution. They had stood up for themselves, spoken out when something was wrong, and seen the airline take real action as a result. But was that truly the end of it? As they touched down and made their way through the airport, Maya found herself reflecting on the flight attendants who had served them so kindly and professionally this time around. She thought about how different they were from Linda, how genuine and attentive they seemed. Maybe not all airline staff were like Linda. Maybe most of them genuinely cared about their passengers. Walking out into the bright sunlight of Crestview's airport, Maya took a deep breath. She wasn't sure what would come of the airline's changes. Would they follow through, Or would things eventually return to business as usual? She didn't have the answer, but she hoped for the best. Either way, she knew she had learned something valuable through the experience: the importance of speaking up, the strength in demanding respect, and the courage to stand firm when something wasn't right. This wasn't just about one flight or one interaction. It was about taking control of her own story, her own comfort, and refusing to let anyone diminish her sense of dignity. Maya glanced at Ethan, who gave her an encouraging smile, as if to say, "We did the right thing." And with that thought, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever happened next, they had made their mark. Consequences, and the airline had taken meaningful steps to address the issue. Maya glanced at Ethan, who gave her a reassuring smile that seemed to say everything. They had navigated this together, and now they could start putting it behind them. For now, at least. Still, deep down, Maya knew the story wasn't truly over. Would Linda face additional consequences, or would the airline's promised changes be enough to prevent future incidents? She couldn't be sure. What she did know was that something had shifted, not just in the way the airline handled the situation, but also within herself. She could only hope these changes weren't temporary. The real test would be whether the promises made would last beyond the initial headlines. For now, though, Maya and Ethan were home, and that was enough. A week passed, and life slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Maya and Ethan resumed their routines: work, social outings, and all the little things that filled their days. Yet, no matter how much they tried to move on, the story lingered in the back of Maya's mind, like a thread she couldn't quite untangle. One afternoon, as Maya sat at her desk at work, her phone buzzed with a notification. She picked it up absent-mindedly, but froze when she saw the headline from a local news outlet: "Flight attendant fired after alleged verbal incident on board." Her heart skipped a beat. The article's lead image was a generic photo of a plane, but the headline immediately drew her in. Could this be about their flight? Hands trembling slightly, she tapped the link. The article described an incident on a Skyline Air flight where a flight attendant, identified only as Linda, had allegedly insulted a couple during a routine interaction. There were no names mentioned, but the description was unmistakable: a request for extra space in the overhead bin, followed by sharp, rude remarks and a subsequent confrontation. Maya's chest tightened as she read further. The article confirmed that after the report, the airline had removed Linda from duty and later dismissed her following an internal investigation. It also noted the airline's public apology and commitment to revamping its customer service training. Maya leaned back in her chair, a shiver running down her spine. The story was out in the public eye now, and there was no going back. Part of her felt relief. Linda's actions had been exposed, and the airline had taken clear steps to address the issue. The incident wasn't just about her and Ethan anymore. It had become a broader example of accountability. But another part of her felt uneasy. How was Linda handling all of this? Had the story been fair in its portrayal of her, or had it reduced a complex situation to a sensational headline? Maya's thoughts were interrupted by another buzz on her phone, this time a text from Ethan. "Did you see the news article?" Maya quickly replied, "Yeah, just saw it. Crazy, right?" She stared at her phone for a moment before typing again, "I wonder how Linda's feeling about all this." Ethan's response came quickly. "Honestly, I'm not sure I care. She crossed a line and the airline took action. She got what she deserved." Maya read his words slowly, letting them sink in. He wasn't wrong. Linda's behavior had been unprofessional, disrespectful, and hurtful. She had insulted them publicly, made them feel small, unwelcome, and uncomfortable. The consequences she faced were justified. There was no question about that. Yet, Maya couldn't shake a faint sense of sympathy. The situation had escalated so quickly. Could things have played out differently if Linda had handled it better? What if she had taken a moment to listen, to pause, before lashing out? Maya sighed, leaning back in her chair. She knew it wasn't her responsibility to dwell on Linda's future. What mattered was that she and Ethan had stood up for themselves. They hadn't let the disrespect slide, and the airline had listened. In the end, that was the most important thing. Linda's actions had led to real consequences, and those consequences had sparked meaningful change, at least for the airline. Something entirely different. Hope. Maya's phone buzzed again, and she glanced down to see Ethan's text. Maybe it's time we let it go. We did what we had to do. Now we can move on. She stared at the message for a moment, processing his words. After a few beats, she typed back, "Yeah, you're right. It's just strange, you know? It feels like this whole thing happened in another life. But I guess I'll be thinking about it for a while." Ethan replied quickly, "I get it, but think of it this way. What happened to us won't happen to anyone else if the airline does what they promised. That's something good." Maya read the message, a faint smile spreading across her face. He was right. It wasn't just about their experience anymore. It was about making sure others wouldn't go through the same thing. The bigger picture mattered far more than the details. She put her phone down, exhaled deeply, and returned her focus to her work. As unsettling as the experience had been, it had pushed her to realize something bigger. Change wasn't easy, especially in places where power dynamics often dictated behavior. But the airline had listened, and her voice had made a difference. Though it would take time for the story to fade, Maya felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. They had turned a negative moment into something meaningful, something with the potential to ripple outward and inspire others to stand up for themselves. That, she thought, was the real victory. Weeks passed, and life gradually returned to normal. Maya and Ethan fell back into their routines: work, catching up with friends, and enjoying the occasional weekend getaway. Every now and then, though, something would remind them of that flight. Maybe it was the sound of a flight attendant's voice on a loudspeaker or the sight of someone adjusting their seat mid-flight. These little triggers brought them back to that moment: the tension, the sting of Linda's words, and the feeling of helplessness. But as time went on, the weight of it began to lift. The constant replay of Linda's behavior and the airline's response faded, replaced by the comfort of familiarity. Maya found herself smiling more, her days feeling brighter. The unease that had once lingered was dissolving. Eventually, she could look back on the situation with a sense of closure. She and Ethan had done what was right. While the incident would never be forgotten entirely, it no longer consumed her thoughts. Then, one afternoon, Maya's phone buzzed unexpectedly. She glanced at the screen to see an unfamiliar number. For a moment she hesitated. Could it be the airline? She picked up, her voice wary. "Hello? Hi, is this Maya Carter?" the voice on the other end asked, polite but formal. "Yes, this is Maya," she replied, sitting up straighter. Her heart beat a little faster. "Who's calling?" "This is James from Skyline Air," the voice said. "I'm following up with you one last time regarding the incident aboard Flight 5742. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." Maya paused, surprised. "No, it's fine. What's this about?" "I wanted to personally thank you again for your patience and for reporting the situation," James continued. "As part of the follow-up process, we've conducted a comprehensive review of our flight crew's actions that day, as well as the overall circumstances surrounding the incident." Maya's curiosity piqued. "More changes?" "Yes," James confirmed. "After further discussions among our leadership team, we've decided to implement a broader customer service initiative across the company. This includes new standards for conflict resolution with a specific focus on cultural sensitivity and inclusion training for all flight staff." Maya blinked, trying to absorb the scope of what he was saying. "So you're saying the entire company is going through this?" she asked. "That's correct," James replied. "This isn't just about a single incident. It's about making sure that every passenger feels valued and respected, regardless of the circumstances. We've realized we've fallen short in the past, and we want to ensure we're setting the right example moving forward." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had anticipated the changes might be limited to a few new training modules or a one-off press release. But this? It sounded like a complete overhaul of how Skyline Air approached customer service. The knot forming in her stomach wasn't one of anxiety this time. It was one of cautious optimism. "That's really good to hear," Maya said after a moment, her voice sincere. James continued, "We know we can't change the past, but we can make meaningful improvements for the future. And your feedback played a significant role in pushing us toward that realization." Maya exhaled slowly. It felt surreal to think their voices had carried enough weight to influence an entire company's direction. We appreciate you trusting us with this matter, James concluded. If you have any additional feedback or concerns, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you again for your patience and for helping us grow. As the call ended, Maya sat in silence, staring at her phone. A wave of emotions swept over her: relief, gratitude, and a sense of pride. The airline was taking real steps to address a systemic issue, and she and Ethan had played a part in sparking that change. Ethan walked in and noticed the look on her face. Who was that? Maya looked up, smiling. It was Skyline. They are rolling out a company-wide customer service overhaul because of what happened. Ethan raised his eyebrows. Really? That's huge. It is, Maya agreed. I wasn't expecting this, but it feels good to know it's not just about us anymore. They're actually trying to make things better. Ethan smiled, wrapping an arm around her. See? You made a difference. And for the first time since the incident, Maya truly felt that was true. And Maya couldn't help but agree. As she sat on the edge of her chair, phone still in hand, the weight of the conversation with James settled over her. She felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, pride, and a touch of disbelief. The airline wasn't just responding to what had happened to her and Ethan. They were addressing something systemic, something that could impact countless passengers moving forward. So, this is a company-wide initiative now? Maya asked, her voice still tinged with skepticism. And it's directly related to what happened on our flight? That's correct, James confirmed. We're fully committed to ensuring our customers feel valued and respected. This initiative is just the beginning. We're also rolling out new feedback systems to give passengers more direct ways to share their experiences, good or bad. It will help us better track where we need to improve. Maya was quiet for a moment, processing the scope of what he'd said. I didn't expect any of this, she admitted. Honestly, I thought this would just be one of those situations where we'd get an apology, maybe some compensation, and then it would be over. But this feels like real change. James's tone softened. We believe it is, and we truly appreciate you bringing this to our attention. You and Ethan helped us identify something we hadn't fully realized was an issue, and for that, we're grateful. Maya felt a wave of relief, followed by a sense of pride she hadn't anticipated. She had doubted whether the airline would follow through, but they seemed to be going above and beyond. For the first time since the incident, she could see how all the frustration, uncertainty, and anger had led to something positive. It was one thing to fix a mistake. It was another to make a lasting change that could improve experiences for countless others. So what's next? Maya asked, still feeling a bit in disbelief. What happens now? We're continuing to roll out training programs and ensuring they're applied effectively across the board, James explained. We're committed to following through on all the promises we made to you. And if you ever feel the need to share additional feedback or insights, you can always reach out. Your perspective has been an important part of this process, and we want to keep that line of communication open. Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Thank you, James. I wasn't expecting to hear all of this, but it's good to know that something meaningful came out of this situation. We couldn't agree more, Maya, James said with a genuine tone. Thank you for your time today, and we hope to welcome you back on board in the future under much better circumstances. As the call ended, Maya sat back in her chair, the weight of the entire experience lifting ever so slightly. She turned to Ethan, who had been quietly listening to her side of the conversation. Well, that was unexpected, she said, her voice a little shaky from the mix of emotions. Ethan grinned. Yeah, no kidding. Sounds like they're actually doing what they said they'd do. This could be huge for them. Maya nodded, still trying to process it all. It feels bigger than just us now, like we were part of something that might actually make a difference for a lot of people. Ethan gave her a knowing look. You were, and I think you'll always remember that. Maya smiled softly, the first real smile she'd felt in weeks. Yeah, I guess I will. For the first time since the flight, Maya felt truly at peace with everything that had happened. It wasn't just about what had been taken from them during that ordeal. It was about what had been gained. The days that followed were filled with an unexpected sense of closure. The call had been the final piece of the puzzle. and Maya found herself reflecting on how far they'd come since that moment on the plane. What had seemed like a low point, Linda's cutting words, the humiliation, the tension, had ultimately sparked a conversation that felt much larger than them. It had become a moment of reckoning, not just for the airline, but for Maya herself. Ethan seemed to carry the same sense of pride, though his was more outward. He often brought up the changes the airline was implementing, pointing out how rare it was for a corporation to take such sweeping steps in response to customer feedback. "You know," he said one evening, "I think we've done something bigger than we even realize." Maya couldn't argue. Looking back, she saw how quickly things had shifted once they'd decided to speak up. What had felt like a powerless moment turned into a catalyst for change, a reminder of the power of standing up for what's right. The experience wasn't just about Linda's behavior or the airline's response. It was about respect, professionalism, and how people should treat one another in situations where power dynamics often come into play. And somewhere within it all, Maya realized they'd started a quiet revolution. Needed the same kind of change. The realization filled Maya with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. One quiet afternoon, as Maya was catching up on emails at home, a new message popped into her inbox. This one wasn't a follow-up call or a generic survey. It was a letter. The subject line read, "A personal thank you from..." Her heart skipped a beat as she clicked it open. The letter was from James, the representative she had spoken to before, and it read, "Dear Maya, we wanted to take a moment to sincerely thank you for your courage and integrity in bringing your experience to light. Your feedback has been instrumental in helping us improve our customer service training and policies. Thanks to you, we've made significant strides toward creating a more respectful and inclusive experience for all of our passengers. As a token of our gratitude, we would like to offer you 2 round-trip tickets on any domestic Skyline Air flight of your choice. We believe that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, and your actions have reinforced that commitment across our company. Please enjoy these tickets as a reminder of the difference you've made. Warm regards, James Peterson. Customer Relations, Skyline Air." Maya stared at the email, letting the words sink in. She hadn't expected anything like this. A gift, something so generous, felt surreal. It wasn't about the material value of the tickets, but what they symbolized. When she showed the email to Ethan, his reaction mirrored her own. "Wow, 2 round-trip tickets," he said, his eyes wide. "That's a pretty big thank you." "I wasn't expecting it," Maya admitted, her voice a mix of disbelief and gratitude, "but it's kind of nice to know they're serious about what they promised." The tickets weren't just a reward, they were a tangible reminder of the impact their voices had made. For Maya, it wasn't about compensation. It was about the acknowledgement of what they had stood up for. The airline's gesture felt like validation. Not just for them, but for every passenger who might have felt belittled or disrespected on a flight. "You know what this means," Ethan said, his tone shifting to playful. "We get a free vacation." Maya laughed, the tension of the past few weeks easing for the first time. "I think we've earned one." For the first time in months, they began to plan an adventure, not just to escape or unwind, but to celebrate what they had accomplished. They didn't know where the tickets would take them, but the possibilities felt endless. As the weeks went on, Maya found herself reflecting on how everything had unfolded. The incident that had once felt like a personal low point had transformed into something powerful, something bigger than herself or Ethan. It wasn't just about standing up to Linda's behavior. It was about sparking a shift within a company. The ripple effect of their actions extended far beyond their personal experience, reaching others who might never know their names, but who would benefit from the changes they'd helped initiate. The tickets sitting on her desk weren't necessary, they were symbolic. What mattered most was the broader message. Speaking up had made a difference. One evening, as they sat on the couch discussing their upcoming trip, Maya turned to Ethan. "Do you think they'll actually stick with it?" she asked, her thoughts drifting to the bigger picture. "I think so," Ethan said thoughtfully. "They've already gone so far. They can't just walk it back now. And people will be watching." Maya nodded, her mind already turning to what else might be possible. She had seen firsthand how one voice could drive change, and she didn't want to stop there. Who knew what other systems, what other spaces, needed someone willing to stand up and say, "This isn't right." For now, though, Maya and Ethan focused on the immediate future. They began narrowing down destinations for their trip, a sense of excitement bubbling between them. Maya knew this wasn't just about a vacation, it was about marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Whatever came next, she carried with her the knowledge that even the smallest actions could create ripples, that one voice could be the spark for something far greater. Maya and Ethan finalized their plans for their trip to California. They couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. Their journey wasn't just about redeeming free tickets. It was a reminder of the progress they had made, not only for themselves, but for others. Standing at the Skyline air ticket counter, they checked in for their flight to Los Angeles. The thought of sunny beaches, bustling city life, and a change of scenery had been too irresistible to pass up. As Maya handed over their details to the friendly staff at the counter, she couldn't help but notice how different this experience felt compared to their infamous first flight. The staff's smiles were genuine, their attitudes warm, and the entire process was seamless. There were no dismissive tones or annoyed glances, just professionalism and care. It was clear to Maya that something had shifted. The airline's promises to improve its customer service weren't just empty words. She could see and feel the difference. As they made their way to the gate, Maya reflected on how far they had come. What had started as an uncomfortable and disheartening moment months ago had turned into something transformative. This trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a continuation of a journey toward change. The airline's commitment to reform, the improvements in their training, and the broader cultural shift they had promised all felt real now. For Maya, this wasn't just about her and Ethan. She felt like they were part of something bigger. Ethan noticed her thoughtful expression and nudged her gently. "You're thinking about it all again, aren't you?" Maya smiled, a little sheepish. "Yeah, I guess I am." He grinned. "Well, it's hard not to. I mean, it's not every day you get to be part of something that actually makes a difference. And now, we get to enjoy the rewards." Maya laughed softly. "I never thought I'd feel this way. At first, it just felt like another bad experience to get through. But now I can see how much it mattered, not just for us, but for other people too." Ethan nodded in agreement. "Exactly. And we didn't just let it slide. We spoke up. That's what made the difference." The announcement for their flight came over the speaker, and the gate agents began calling passengers to board. Maya and Ethan stood up, ready to begin the next chapter of their journey. As they walked down the jet bridge and into the plane, Maya couldn't help but notice how welcoming the flight attendants were. The atmosphere was light, the staff's smiles warm and genuine. It was a stark contrast to the tension-filled flight they had endured months ago. When the plane took off and ascended into the sky, Maya glanced out the window at the sprawling city below. The setting sun bathed the horizon in a golden glow, and for the first time in months, she felt a profound sense of peace. Ethan leaned over, noticing the faraway look in her eyes. "You're thinking about it again, aren't you?" Maya nodded, her smile soft. "I guess I am. But you know, I think I've finally made peace with it. We did something important, Ethan. We stood up, and things changed because of it." Ethan smiled back, his eyes filled with pride. "I'm proud of us. And you've got to admit, it feels pretty good to know we made a difference." Maya nodded again, the weight of the past few months lifting off her shoulders. What had started as an uncomfortable and frustrating experience had become something empowering. It had taught her the importance of standing up for herself and for what was right. As the plane cruised toward Los Angeles, Maya felt the tension that had lingered for months finally dissipate. This wasn't just the end of one story, it was the beginning of something greater. She leaned back in her seat, letting the hum of the engines soothe her, and thought about all the possibilities that lay ahead. They had spoken up, and their voices had made a difference. Now, as they embarked on this new adventure, Maya knew that this wasn't just a vacation. It was a celebration of what they had achieved, and a reminder of the power of standing up for what's right. For the first time, she truly believed that the ripple they had started would continue to grow, inspiring others to do the same. As Maya and Ethan embarked on their trip to Los Angeles, they realized this journey wasn't just about exploring a new city or taking a break. It was about everything they had learned, everything they had stood for. Each choice they made, each time they stood up for themselves and others, contributed to a ripple effect, a chance to make things better for everyone. High above the clouds, Maya felt a sense of confidence she hadn't known before. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. In Los Angeles, they basked in the warmth of the California sun, taking time to relax, explore, and heal. The trip was everything they had hoped for: peaceful, invigorating, and transformative. From wandering the bustling streets to savoring delicious meals and watching the waves roll in, every moment felt like a celebration of the progress they had made. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maya and Ethan sat quietly on the beach. The sound of the waves filled the air, and Maya's thoughts drifted to everything that had happened over the past few months. "You know," Maya said softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon, "this whole experience, it's changed me. I mean, I never thought one moment, one small action, could turn into something this big." Ethan reached for her hand, his smile gentle. "I know exactly what you mean. It's like we set something in motion without even realizing it. I didn't know how powerful just speaking up could be." Maya nodded, her eyes glistening in the fading light. "I've been thinking, what if we hadn't said anything? What if we had just let it go? But now, looking back, I see how much one action can really make a difference. It's true, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. But when you do stand up, things can change." The weight of her words lingered between them, and for the first time in a long while, Maya felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This journey wasn't just about Linda or the airline. It had been about discovering her own strength, realizing her voice had power, and learning that standing up for what was right could lead to meaningful change. Ethan squeezed her hand, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "We didn't just make a difference for ourselves, you know? Sure, we got the tickets and an apology, but those changes the airline made, the training, the new policies, they're going to affect so many other people. It's bigger than us now." Maya's smile widened, a spark of pride lighting her expression. She had never imagined their actions would ripple so far. But it wasn't just the changes in the airline that filled her with hope. It was what those changes symbolized. Every future passenger who felt respected, every person who had once felt dismissed or belittled would benefit from this. Leaning back against the sand, Maya sighed contentedly. "I'm glad we did it," she said. "I'm glad we spoke up, even if I didn't fully understand the impact at first. Now, I see it. We really did make a difference." Ethan turned to her, his face soft with affection. "And we'll keep making a difference, every time we stand up for what's right. This is just the beginning." The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow across the ocean. In that moment, Maya felt lighter than she had in months. She had learned so much about the courage it took to confront injustice, the strength in standing up for herself, and the extraordinary power of small actions to create ripples of change. Hand in hand, they made their way back toward the city, their steps lighter, their hearts full. The anger, uncertainty, and doubts that had once weighed on Maya had lifted, leaving behind a deep sense of satisfaction. They had stood up, they had spoken out, and they had made a difference. This trip was more than just a getaway. It was a reminder that change starts with us. As they walked toward the bustling streets of Los Angeles, Maya knew that wherever life took her next, she would continue to speak up and stand for what was right. She had learned, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that her voice could change the world, one small moment at a time. With that thought in her heart, Maya squeezed Ethan's hand, a renewed confidence propelling her forward. Whatever came next, she knew they had already made their mark. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring content. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.